His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet, taking a stand for world peace by combating global injustices. When Tenzin Gyatso was formally recognized as the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet in 1939, he began a lifelong quest for peace, justice, and equality. This journey would take him from his humble role as a spiritual leader in Tibet to advocating for world peace and fighting to restore justice to his country. In Tibetan culture, the Dalai Lama is believed to be a reincarnated enlightened being who assumes the spiritual and political responsibilities for Tibet when fully trained. Each Dalai Lama has one primary duty in life: to serve humankind. This is accomplished through the promotion of simple human values such as compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline. Over many decades, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has pursued this duty by taking a stand for world peace and human rights. He serves as a beacon of hope and freedom for the oppressed, and has inspired countless numbers to follow in his footsteps. Born in 1935 in Taxter village in Tibet, Tenzin Gyatso was first identified by Buddhist monks at the age of 3 as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama. He was formally recognized as the 14th Dalai Lama in 1939 and began his education shortly thereafter. He assumed full spiritual and political leadership of Tibet at the age of 15 in 1950. However, that leadership was to be short-lived as he was pushed aside when China invaded and occupied Tibet later that same year. Despite the Dalai Lama's attempts to resolve the occupation peacefully, the Tibetan people rose up against Chinese rule on March 10, 1959. The Chinese army brutally crushed the rebellion, and 1 week after the uprising began, the Dalai Lama, advised to flee by his counselors and followers, left Tibet for a life of exile in India. An estimated 80,000 Tibetans followed in his wake, leaving their homeland and joining His Holiness in exile. Immediately following his exile, His Holiness held a press conference in which he took a stance against the 17-point agreement between Tibet and China. This agreement, violently forced upon the people of Tibet in 1951, gave China complete political control over Tibet in exchange for relatively small amounts of autonomy. The Dalai Lama declared that his government held the only legitimate claim for the rule of Tibet and that the Chinese were an illegal occupying force. Following his repudiation of the 17-point agreement, he shifted his efforts to supporting the nearly 80,000 Tibetan refugees that had escaped with him to India. He set his priorities to resettlement and continuing their cultural traditions. The Dalai Lama believed that in time, the Tibetans could use truth, justice, and courage as weapons and prevail in regaining freedom for Tibet. In the early years of his exile, His Holiness appealed to the United Nations to stand for the protection of the safety and rights of the Tibetan people under Chinese rule. His appeals directly led to 3 resolutions in which the Chinese government agreed to preserve certain rights for Tibetans. In 1963, he drafted a constitution for Tibet which would assure a democratic form of government. Called the Charter of Tibetans in Exile, this constitution solidified his government's stance on freedom of speech, beliefs, assembly, and movement. In 1987, the Dalai Lama stood for a 5-point peace plan he presented at the Congressional Human Rights Caucus in Washington, D.C. This plan called for designating Tibet as a zone of peace, bringing an end to the massive transfer of native Chinese into Tibet, restoring fundamental human rights and democratic freedoms, discontinuing the use of Tibet for nuclear weapons productions, as well as urging negotiations on the future of Tibet between the Tibetan and Chinese people. 2 years later, on December 10, 1989, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for standing for the liberation of Tibet through nonviolent means. Even in the face of extreme danger and aggression, His Holiness advocated for peaceful solutions through open dialogue, tolerance, and mutual respect.
And in 1989, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his non-violent struggle for liberation of Tibet. And he consistently advocated policies of non-violence, and even in the face of extreme aggression.
I am very happy to be here with you today to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace. I am no one special, but I believe the prize is a recognition of the true value of altruism, love, compassion, and nonviolence, which I try to practice.
Throughout his life, the Dalai Lama has focused not only on the liberation of Tibet and its people, but also on promoting peace and harmony on a global scale. He stated early on that his life is guided by 3 major commitments: the preservation of Tibet's Buddhist culture, the fostering of interreligious harmony, and the promotion of basic human values in the interest of human happiness.
The Dalai Lama is a man of peace. He also became the first Nobel laureate to be recognized for his concern for global problems.
To achieve these commitments, it was clear he had to become more than just the leader of Tibet. He would need to accept a role on the world stage to combat injustices and oppression and stand for world peace. To help preserve Tibetan Buddhist culture, the Dalai Lama opened the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamshala, India in 1970. This library contains more than 80,000 manuscripts, books, artifacts, and documents which were relocated from Tibet to India in 1959. The library not only preserves the rich culture of Tibetan Buddhism, but also promotes peace and understanding through learning and the free exchange of information. To foster interreligious harmony, the Dalai Lama has met with many religious leaders around the globe. He was the first Dalai Lama in history to meet with the head of a major Western religion when, in 1973, he traveled to Vatican City to meet Pope Paul VI of the Catholic Church. Over the years, he has met with each successive pope, including most recently Pope Benedict XVI in 2006. His Holiness has also held meetings with prominent leaders of Jewish, Anglican, Hindu, Mormon, and Islamic faiths, as well as leaders of many other religious denominations. In these discussions, the Dalai Lama has stressed the importance of a common commitment to peace and to standing up for basic human rights of people everywhere. These discussions have been fruitful and have helped to foster a common brotherhood amongst religions all over the world. By promoting the basic human values of compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline, the Dalai Lama believes world peace can be achieved. He refers to this set of values as secular ethics and has stated that they can be achieved by all, no matter their religious affiliation or lack thereof.
So the Dalai Lama refers to these human values as secular ethics, such as compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline.
His Holiness has spread his message by traveling far and wide and speaking with people of all nations. His first public address outside of Tibet occurred in 1959 in India, shortly after his exile. He became the first Dalai Lama to travel outside of Asia when, in 1973, he visited 12 European countries in 75 days. Since then, he has gone on to speak at schools, universities, in front of governing bodies, and at international peace and human rights conferences around the world. He has spoken not only with prominent world leaders, but has also addressed common men and women, believing that sharing his message with the public is the best way to bring about true change.
In order to carry effective ways and methods to bring peace, firstly, you need willpower to face any conflict without using violence, but through dialogue, through talk, face to face.
On May 18, 2010, the Dalai Lama traveled to the University of Northern Iowa for an event open to the general public. He was awarded an honorary doctorate of humane letters by the university and addressed those in attendance. In his keynote speech, he reiterated his hope for a meaningful dialogue with China regarding the rights of the people of Tibet, and spoke of the importance of universal responsibility and striving to lead a life that serves humanity. His words and lessons continue to inspire to this very day. As recently as March 10, 2017, the Minneapolis City Council passed a resolution in support of the people of Tibet and calling on the Chinese government to again open a dialogue with His Holiness.
Be it further resolved that the Minneapolis City Council hereby urges the government of China to respect Tibetan people's rights to self-determination and to immediately resume dialogues with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration.
City Council members channeled the spirit of the Dalai Lama's words by standing for the approval of the resolution over the objections of the Chinese consulate in Washington, D.C. Through his teachings, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has inspired untold millions to stand for world peace by nonviolent means and to combat global injustices. He has encouraged individuals to stand for the equality of all people by promoting basic human compassion. His Holiness continues to build on a lifetime of service, not only to Tibetans, but to humanity in general. By taking a stand for world peace and combating global injustices, Tenzin Gyatso has ensured that his words and wisdom will long outlast his current incarnation as the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet.